Welcome to Biz Help for You with host Candy Messer. Entrepreneurs like to focus on the big picture, like profitability, success, and a smooth-running organization. But there always seems to be those little things like taxes, employee compensation, laws, regulations, and more. Now you can get the answers you need in one place. Join us today as we break it all down for you. Now, here's your host, Candy Messer.
Hello and welcome to Biz Help for You with Candy Messer. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the topic of our last episode, serial entrepreneurship. And if you were unable to join us and would like to listen to the show, links can be found on our YouTube and Facebook pages, as well as multiple favorite podcast platforms. And if you'd like to receive notifications on when our podcasts have been uploaded, please like and subscribe. And if there are topics you'd find beneficial or questions you have, please feel free to reach out to me at media@abandp.com. Now let's learn a little bit about our guest today. Brenden is the founder of Master Talk, and he coaches ambitious executives and entrepreneurs to become top 1% communicators in their industry. He also has a popular YouTube channel called Master Talk, with the goal of providing free access to communication tools for everyone in the world. So Brenden, welcome to the show today.
Candy, the pleasure is absolutely mine. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm glad to have you. I know this is going to be an interesting topic to discuss. But before I ask you any other questions that I have for you on the topic, I'd love for you to tell us just a little bit more about yourself and how did you get into public speaking?
Yeah, for sure, Candy. Happy to do that. So it all started when I was in college/university. I went to business school, and my goal in life was never to be an entrepreneur. It was to be an executive at a company. So I did these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So other guys my age were playing rugby and baseball and basketball. Not really my thing. I did presentations competitively, Candy. That's why I learned how to speak. But then as I got older, I started coaching a lot of the students in those university programs, not because I was a great coach, but because the alternative they had was a rock. So I guess they picked me. And that's how I learned the art of coaching. But then a few years later, I had the idea for the YouTube channel Master Talk because I felt that all the information I was sharing with them wasn't available for free to the world. So I started posting videos and it just turned into something I never thought it would.
Nice. I love that. You know, when we do things from like that perspective of wanting to help and then you see, you know, how much really it is needed out there. So I love that you're doing that. That's wonderful. So I would love for you just to first talk about what is the biggest challenge with public speaking. I mean, we all have heard, you know, people would rather go to the dentist than have to speak in public, you know, or pay taxes sometimes, you know, so it's that thing that people just absolutely hate. And why is that?
Absolutely. So the biggest challenge, in my opinion, a lot of coaches would argue that it's fear. My opinion, though, is that it's motivation. Why is that? Because if we're not motivated enough to master our communication skills, we're not going to be able to push through the fear. But the opposite isn't true. If we're really motivated to push through our fear and to communicate, we have that burning desire, we'll knock out the fear any day of the week. So now the question becomes, why do we struggle with motivation and communication? And the answer is super simple, because the languaging that we associate to communication is fairly negative. We think about the fear, the stress, the anxiety, like the context for the question, right? Oh my God, we always compare it to anxiety. Whereas my version of this, Candy, is very different, which is to dream. How would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator? Now, this is a question a lot of people don't really think about. And that's really the key, is to start getting empowered, start thinking about how would our life be different, and use that energy to actually knock out our communication goals.
I think that's so true as well, too, because like I am actually shy, introverted, the whole thing, right? And a podcast was never on my to-do list. But wanting to share with entrepreneurs information to help them be successful is my goal, right? And so here I am, right? So I definitely have stepped out of the comfort zone, and sure, it was scary, but I do love what I'm doing. So I think that point that you have is whatever's motivating you is going to drive you past that fear is right on. At least for me, like I feel that I am like an example of what you're just talking about.
Absolutely. I appreciate that.
So if someone is hearing this and saying, okay, like I do have a passion, I do know I need to share, I do want to get out there and start speaking, but I'm not sure what I should be doing and what are my first steps, what would you tell them?
Right. So there's two kind of perspectives there, Ken. I'm happy to tackle both of you. Like, one is what to practice on a daily basis, just get better at the skill. And the
Mhm.
other piece is how do you leverage that skill to get on more stages, to create more income in your business and all that stuff. So let's start with
Mhm.
the first one. So I call this my easy threes. Communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time, Candy. One of those balls is smiling like you just did right now, very well.
Mhm.
Right. Another one is pausing. Another one is eye contact, body language. The list goes on, storytelling, you name it. So it's very confusing for beginners. So instead, what I think about is what are the three easiest balls that we can throw in the air and juggle? And I call them my easy threes, which are the random word exercise, question drills, and sending video messages. So let's start with number
Mhm.
one, the random word exercise. And I'll pause at each one so I don't monologue for 10 minutes here. But the idea is the random word exercise, Candies. Pick a random word like phone, like computer, like matrix, and create random presentations out of thin air. And what I always tell people, especially clients, is if you can make sense out of nonsense, you can make sense out of anything. And that's the
Mhm.
power. So that's number one.
Mhm. So as you're talking, I'm thinking too, as we've heard a lot of times too, when you're presenting, you want it to be often interactive or engaging. And if people are up there just talking and especially presenting like words on a PowerPoint or something, it gets to be boring almost. So I guess along what you were just talking about, like creating this random, presentation, how would you encourage them to make that where it's going to be engaging for those who are listening?
Right. So my advice always, Candy, when we do the random word exercise is we don't get points for doing it well. We
Mhm.
get points for doing it a lot.
Mm,
So what I always recommend people think about is if you've done the exercise less than 100 times, the key is just to do it 100 times. Not worry
mhm,
about the engagement and the vocal tone variety and the pacing, but rather have fun with our communication skills. It's something we never really think about or do. So especially for those listening to this podcast who have families, I always recommend, that's why I tell my clients to do this with their kids. So whenever they're in a car ride with them, instead of listening to music, just have
mhm.
them do the random word exercise. That's how you get it done really quickly. Another one is showering, right? Everyone takes showers. I hope so, anyways. Everyone's listening to
Right.
this. So you got 10, 15 minutes there as you're taking a shower. Do the random word exercise a few times there. And those are some keys to pick it up. And what you'll find, kind of like your podcast, is that episode, 20 or 200 or 50 is always better than episode one. So that's the key, is just
Mhm.
your reps.
Right. Okay, so going back to you were going to have three things, and I know I kind of diverted a little bit because as we were talking, I had this thought again about having these presentations that are engaging. So your first one you said was kind of these random word games, basically. So presentation. So what's number two again, and go into detail on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to, Candy. So number two is question drills. We get asked questions all the time in our life, Candy. All the time.
Hmm.
At work, at school, from our family. Did you take out the trash? We get asked questions all the time, right? Or on a podcast like this one.
Hmm.
But when I started, this journey with guesting on podcasts, I was very reactive, like most of us are, to questions. We wait for the question to appear, and then we react to the question. I'll give you one I got a few years ago. It was hilarious and completely caught me off guard. And the question was, Brenden, where does the fear of communication come from? And I looked at the guy and I said, San Diego, Los Angeles? Like, I don't know, man. So I was super lost and confused because I was being reactive.
Hmm.
Whereas what you'll notice from this podcast is all the answers I give are pretty like seamless. It's very quick and swift and to the point. That's not because Brendan is cool or anything. It's because Brendan's done a lot of work, which is the following,
Hmm.
which is super easy to do. 5 minutes a day. That's all I ask. Not 5 hours, not 5 million years here, 5 minutes. One question a day. Write down a ton of questions that you get asked about your expertise and
Hmm.
write down the answer to a question every single day for a year. If you do
Hmm.
that for a year, Candy, you'll have answered 365 questions about your expertise and you will be unbeatable.
Hmm. I love that. That's a great idea. I don't think I've ever heard that before. And yeah, it's so simple. right? To just answer that question and have that confidence. If you are asked that question, you can easily just answer and not have to think about what is it that I want to say.
Absolutely, Candy. Which brings us to number 3. It's so simple, nobody does it. Make a list of the 5 people you love the most in your life. It can be your mom, your brother, your sister, your nieces, your nephew, your clients that you adore, or people that you work with at work. And ask yourself a simple question. When was the last time that you sent them, not a 20-minute, not a 20-hour, but a 20-second video message just saying what you appreciate about them? Hey, Candy, really love the work that you're putting into this podcast. I love the fact that despite that you were shy and introvert, you still took a chance to start this and really impact people's lives. Thank you for the work that you do. Simple, right? It's not crazy. 20 seconds, Candy. That's all I ask. It's just most of us, when we look at that list, the answer is 0. We've never sent a single one. So I would start there. Don't even worry about social media. Don't even worry about posting and going into the public eye and doing all this stuff. Start with the people that you love.
That's a great tip too. Like I'm learning so much just from this conversation. So I know listeners are going to be just like eating up this information. So I'm so glad we're talking about this. But I know too, with COVID, a lot of people have had to do presentations virtually instead of on the stage. And can you maybe talk about how you can present? Are there differences in terms of when you're in front of people versus when you're presenting online? And how can we be better presenters in both applications?
Absolutely, Candy. So a lot of the applications we talked about, especially the easy 3s, that can be applied in any content. It just makes you a better speaker. But I would say for online in particular, there's 3 key things that we have to keep in mind. The first one, which is a key difference, is eye contact. So when you're in person, you have to move your head around whenever you're talking to people so you can move your eyes to the person that's in the room. But online, whether you're speaking to 1 or 10,000 people, you're only supposed to look in one area, which is the camera lens.
Right.
You always got to keep looking at the lens, which is a good thing in some ways. Because if you look at 10, even if there's 10,000 people in the call, you just have to look in one direction. So you could put a post-it note that has an arrow that says "look here" or else. That's a fun one. It's a bit more sarcastic. You could put your favorite food next to the lens, your family, right? Those are some ways that you could do that. So that's number 1. Number 2 is energy. Let's face it, Candy. At the end of the day, it's a lot easier to show up with energy when the person's right next to you. Right? You feel their energy. We can get lunch after. It's cool. We can hug. We can shake hands. Like, it's cool, right? There's that energy. But in person, or rather online, that interaction isn't as easy. Because you could wake up and go, well, my meeting's at 11 with Candy. Maybe we can wear pajamas. Maybe I don't have to shower this. Right? So there's that. There's not that level of commitment. So the only way to do this, frankly, is to bring more energy in person and transfer as much of that as possible back online, which I've tried doing for the last few years of being an online presenter, since that's most of the business these days. So that's number 2. And finally, number 3 is audience accessibility. It's a lot easier for us to get feedback from our audience when we're in person because there's no friction. You can just go in front of them. They're right there. Get lunch with them, talk to them, have those deep, meaningful conversations. Hard to do online because the second the Zoom call is over, conversation just ends. So you got to bring those relationships offline. Just talk to them.
Well, and it's hard to judge, like the body language and things too, right? Like if you're in person, you're going to see if people are like slumping, crossing their arms, looking away, and, showing signs of tiredness or boredom or whatever, where if it's on Zoom, maybe someone turns off their camera or, maybe there's just so many people, you can't really see everyone too and know how they're interacting or reacting to what you're saying too. So I guess that's another hard thing too about having the virtual presentation. So are there any other tips about maybe how you can learn from the little bit that you could see on the camera, how people are taking your message?
Absolutely. So here's what I would say, Candy. The advice is simple, but it's not what people want to hear. And the advice is don't wait for the moment. The advice is prepare for the moment. What does that mean? That means before the actual presentation, what you want to do is you want to get a Zoom call together with your buddies. If you have a coach, even better. But people around you, they're there to support you. And they're the ones who are calling you out on that Zoom call. And you can practice with them. I call them Zoom test calls. And that's the best way to do it, frankly. But the key is you don't want to reinvent the wheel whenever you're giving an online presentation. I'm a big believer of this. I never especially when it counts, like it's for money or it's a big client. It's never the first time I'm presenting it. I've already given that play many times before. So even if people are terrible, like even if there's no cameras on, even if it's just me, because sometimes when you're giving webinar presentations, it's literally just you. You don't see, even if there might be 100 people listening. So you have to kind of reenact the same play, assuming that those 100 people are in front of you, which is of course challenging.
Right. And I would love to ask your feedback on like voice and things like that too, right? When you're presenting, especially like you're talking about a webinar, you can't even see anyone and you might be going through your slides and, talking about the information. How can you make that interesting using your voice even to keep people wanting to listen because it's not like a monotone or things like that?
Right. So the next piece, Candy, is a strategy I teach called puzzles. Let's dive into that directly. That answers the question, which is communication is like a jigsaw puzzle. You know those toy puzzles we used to play as kids, and some of us still do. So question for you, Candy, which don't worry, is super easy. Let's say you're working on a puzzle yourself. Which pieces do you start with first and why?
I love to start with the edges, right? You've got the flat sides, so it's a little easier to put it together.
100%, right? So no trick question. It's super easy. You're absolutely right. Right. And they're easier to find in the box too. So you put the edges together. So why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because in communication, we don't do that, Candy. We do the opposite. We start the middle first. We shove a bunch of content in our presentation. We get to the presentation. We ramble throughout the whole bloody thing. And then the last slide sounds something like this. Thanks. That's how like 95% of these things go. Let's not do that. Because it's not just about practicing, it's about practicing in the right way, which means practice like a jigsaw puzzle. Start with the edges first. Practice your introduction 50 times, not 3 times, not 5 times. Do it 50 times. 50 seems like a big number. It actually isn't, Candy, because the intro is like 90 seconds. It'll take you like an hour and a half to get that done. Same thing with the close. What's a great movie with a terrible ending? Last time I checked, terrible movie. Do the same thing with the end. Then dive towards the middle. But to answer your question about, Brenden, how do we become more engaging? Well, when you do the intro 50 times, you start to learn a lot faster your content. So when you learn the content really quickly, Candy, you don't worry about it anymore. So you're just focused on delivery. So that way, when you do it 50 times for the intro, you'll feel that confidence. You'll know you sound good, and you'll bring that momentum to the rest of your keynote.
I think that's really good too, because it becomes more like second nature. You're not feeling like you have to remember every word and you're thinking through so much that it doesn't sound like it flows, right? So at least if you can have it where you've gone over it many times, you may not remember every single thing you want to say it and the way you want to say it, but most of it will be there and come out.
Correct.
So in terms of the actual presentations too, because I've seen this happen a lot where someone is saying, oh, can I share my screen? And then they're trying to get their presentation up and then they've got to try to get it to the first slide. And like, it takes a little bit of time to even get all of that ready. So of course, we all know that people are nervous and trying to get it, put together, and we're all very forgiving. But what would you give as tips, again, to maybe have that presentation ready on that first slide, or whatever they need to be doing before that screen is even shared?
Sure, Candy. So here's what I would say. Let me be a little vulnerable. I make that mistake all the time myself, and I'm the communication expert. Right. So the reason I say that is we shouldn't worry about the little details sometimes, because if we have to get this and this and this right, then we're not gonna. I'm sure there's one question I even give the perfect answer, and that's okay. We live and we learn. But there is a strategy though to buy time in a way that people don't even pay attention to the slide. And the problem with most people is they create dead time in their Zoom call. What does that mean? So there's like a little awkwardness in like the first 2 to 3 minutes. Hey, Candy, welcome to my call. And yeah, we're just gonna wait for people to come in. I never start my calls that way. Even if I'm getting the slides together, I'm putting the first slide up because I'm going from meeting to meeting. So sometimes you don't have time to bring up the first slide when the meeting starts. So instead, what I do is I go, as you're jumping into this call, we want all of you to just take 2 minutes right now to reflect on the following question. What is your intention for this meeting? What is the number one reason why you want to become an exceptional communicator? Which is great for intention setting. So that's the other piece is don't worry too much about doing all that, the admin stuff on time, but don't create dead time. So while people are reflecting, they're not paying attention to what's on your side because they're just doing your homework. So when you're putting on the slides, they don't worry about it. That's
I
it.
think that's a really good point that you're talking about too, because it happens where you'll join, let's say something's supposed to start at noon and then not everyone's there that they know is registered. And we're going to wait a few more minutes for people to come in, so if you're someone who's actually in charge of that meeting, and maybe you're not even the speaker, but you're the one that's facilitating it, what would you tell them about how much time, or do you really wait, or, that whole thing to make sure people are in, but at the same time, not wasting people's time?
Right. So there's no hard fast rule here, right? Because when I'm in a corporate workshop, look, I gotta wait. There's no option. The boss is who's paying me the money that I charge to be there. I ain't gonna give my opinion there. So whatever she wants, I just follow. And then there's other situations where it's my personal workshop, like the free training we're gonna talk about at the end of this call, where I get to choose. So everyone's different, but I would say regardless, you want to start your presentation as soon as the clock starts, but you don't want to start the main presentation if you feel half the people aren't there, but you need to start with something. So one thing I do on coaching calls, as an example, I do in workshops as well, is I go like that's the one question we talked about earlier. What's your intention for this meeting? Another one I like is a quick gratitude exercise. Hey team, let's just take 2 minutes before we get started this workshop today. What are you grateful for? What's one thing you're grateful for? And it always makes people feel great because nobody really does it on a consistent basis. So they go, well, I'm grateful for my mom and my sister. And it's nice and it's a great exercise. And the people who are jumping in, they're not really missing anything. Because when they jump on the call, let's say they're 3 minutes late because they had an emergency or something, you just jump on, you repeat the exercise. Hey guys, everyone's just working on a quick gratitude. Just work on it and it'll take you 10 seconds. And then you jump into the work. That's the way I would play it.
Right. Well, and you talked about briefly, and I read in your bio that you have Master Talk, right, where you're sharing this free information through videos and things too. So how did you come up with that concept? And, what type of content are you sharing on there so people can be like, oh, I really need that. I want to get over there and listen.
Absolutely, Candy. My mission in life is I think the next Elon Musk is a 7-year-old girl who can't afford me. So given that, I want Master Talk to be the encyclopedia for anything related to communication. Obviously, I'm not the oldest person you've had on the show, so I have a long life in front of me. But the goal is, how do I continuously share free content? Because I don't need to post videos anymore. I do just fine in the business. But it's really about how do I keep sharing those free resources for people who can't afford a communication coach. And today, the YouTube channel, I'm very grateful, has had great amounts of success and has hundreds of free videos that people can check out.
Wonderful. And in terms of like what you've said so far about like practice your intro 50 times, go over your conclusion, then worry about the middle, and this will flow a little bit better. But are there other exercises maybe that you could recommend that will help people do better in their presentations, or even just their one-on-one communication with someone just in their regular daily life?
Here's what I would say, Candy, and I always like to use this opportunity to talk about a public service announcement. And here's the public service announcement. People are forgetting the number one rule of communication, which is the best way to speak is to speak. The problem that I have with podcast interviews, and it has nothing to do with the host because you're incredible, is that people are listening to the show. Is that they're listening to the show and they're thinking this, wow, Candy brought on such a great guest, hopefully. Oh my God. Right? He's sharing all of this tips. There's no paywall. It's like the random word exercise. I could do this tomorrow. I could do the question drill tomorrow. It's so simple. I never thought of it. The video messages, but they don't do it. Right? They're always looking for the next tip. Hey, Brenden, what else you got for me? What are 10, 15 tips you? Here's the real advice. The real advice for everyone listening to this is, have you booked 15 minutes in your calendar to do all of this tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't, you're missing the point. Because the best way to speak is not to listen to Candy and me speak. The reason Candy's better at communication is because she took the action, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's start the podcast. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the point, is you got to start doing the exercises. And if you do that and you DM me, I will personally hand you the other exercise. But I think the key is we got to get started.
Mm-hmm. I love that too, because
Yeah.
I mean, we've all heard too, we'll buy a course, right? And we'll go through it and the information just kind of sits there. We don't actually apply it, but we've been on the master class to hear what you need to do or like different things. So putting on that calendar, let's focus on this for 15 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour, whatever it is, and actually just doing one or two of those things to start, then you're making progress, right? You're not procrastinating and you're accomplishing something. And when you accomplish that, then you can move on to the next step. And right, you said, reach out to you, get another exercise or something. But I think that's so true, is people will hear something, but never really implement.
Absolutely. And you're welcome to ask me for more tips, but I think it's important to think
Mm-hmm.
about as a group, because I find a lot of us when we listen to podcasts, and this is a mistake I used to make all the time, is I would go like, oh, okay, these are all great tips, but I don't have like a little action item at the bottom. What are the
Mm-hmm.
3 things that I'll actually do tomorrow? Because for me, if somebody listened to us for 30 minutes and all they did was the random word exercise, I'd be super happy. Because to me, that's a
Mm-hmm.
big win, because they took action, and that's what I'd
Right.
love for people.
Mm-hmm. So the take home from today's podcast, listen, take one thing to start and just do something, make a forward progress, right?
Exactly. You
And
got
then
it.
over time, you'll become more comfortable.
Like you
Perfect.
did, right? Because when you started the podcast, you're probably like, oh my God, I'm talking to this person. How did I get this person on the show? What am I supposed to do? But then when you get a couple of interviews and you're like, okay, like this is
Mm-hmm.
not as bad as I thought it was. Let's just keep going. And you're probably a lot better than you were when you started.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I was terrified. I mean, like I said, I didn't even intend to do this. It was never on my bucket list, but actually an executive producer from Voice America reached out to me and said, "Oh, we see the content that you're sharing on LinkedIn. We think it would make a great, radio show. Would you be one of our, podcasts?" And I finally said, okay, but I was so scared. And at the time it was live. It was basically like 50 minutes of content. And I had to make sure that I had enough, for people to fill. And sometimes I would ask someone a question and they'd give like a 5-word answer, right? And not expand. And I'm trying to, get people to give me information. And it was scary. And then over time, my husband said, you know what? People are searching YouTube. You should record it, do videos, post it. You could still put it out as a podcast, but at least have video as well. And that's, kind of what we did. So about 2 years ago, a little less than 2 years ago now, is when I switched and started doing it myself. But again, it was, oh my gosh, like, I hope I do okay. And I hope, but the goal is really, again, I want to share content with entrepreneurs to help them be successful. There's too many businesses who are failing, and I want to give them what they need to be successful in a vast array of fields, right? My field is financial. We're not talking financial today, but that's my goal, right? Is to really get the word out there. And so I think having that passion and that desire to help has to make it where you put the fear aside and move forward.
I completely agree. And by the way, is definitely applies to me too. When I started master, I was a 22-year-old kid, Candy, in my mother's basement. I had a bachelor's degree in accounting. Who in the world was I to share communication tips with the world? And that's really the key, is I still did it anyways. Why? Not for my amazing executives who obviously pay my bills and allow me to eat every single day, but more importantly for the 15-year-old girl who can't afford me. If I don't share the videos, who else is she going to relate to on the internet? And the answer is nobody, because most people in my industry are double my age, or at least when I started. Not so much of a double anymore, but that's the key, is we got to figure out. And Ali Gadet says it so well. He says, if you help one person, Candy, the world will give you permission to help everyone else.
Oh, I love that. That's amazing. Well, I know we've had some great information that we're sharing, but we are going to be having to end this very soon. So I want to ask if you have an offer that you would like to share with the listeners.
Absolutely, Candy. It was so great to be on. Thanks so much for having me. So two ways to keep in touch. One is, of course, the YouTube channel where you can type Master Talk in one word. And you'll have access to a ton of free videos. And the second one, for those of you who want to see me live, I do a live training on Zoom every 3 weeks on communication. This is not some boring webinar. It's live, it's interactive, it's fun, and I facilitate it, and it's free. So if you want to register for that, just go to rockstarcommunicator.com.
Perfect. And do you want to share any other ways to connect with you? Maybe LinkedIn, or if you're on Instagram or anything else like that?
I'm on LinkedIn too. If you have the courage to find how to spell my name, but I think Master Talk is easier.
Okay, sounds good. I just like to be able to have resources available if you wanted to share something else. But yeah, we can have them go to your website, and we'll put everything in the show notes too. So those who are listening, you can go there to find how to connect with him. But Brenden, I just want to thank you so much for being a guest on my show. I really enjoyed the conversation that we had today.
Likewise, this is amazing, Candy. Thanks for this. Really appreciate it.
Sure. And I want to thank the listener as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that you found this topic interesting and that it answered some of your questions about how to master the art of virtual presentations. And be sure to reach out to Brenden if you have any additional questions or comments, or you could reach us at media@abandp.com. I hope you can join us for our next episode, Business Legal Life Cycle. And please remember, you can connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And my website is abandp.com. You can find the podcast posted on multiple favorite podcast platforms, including Google, TuneIn, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. And would you please share our show with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? I'd really appreciate your support. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.